You recently returned to Silicon Valley from Bangalore, where you established Cisco's more or less second headquarters. Why did you choose India?
Um, I've always been passionate about emerging markets, and it's a great opportunity for companies. A lot of companies look at India for cost and labor arbitrage, and we looked at India for opportunities, access to new talent, access to new markets, and that access to new partners, collaboration with governments, and they're building a nation, and that we're building companies. Is there a way somewhere in the middle? And we specifically chose for India, English speaking, still getting younger, a big internal market. And it basically, 20 million people coming to middle class every year. That means that you add an Australia every year to the market. All in all, we jumped. Also proximity, William. And that so from a timing point of view. And the good news is it's 12 and a half hours away from the US. And the bad news, it's 12 and a half hours away. But you can go around the clock, and that you can together, and that cover 24 hours in a day. And you go to sleep here, you wake up there. The other thing, and that's out of India, if you draw a circle of a 5-hour flight, you reach 70% of world population. And the other thing, from time zones point of view, that you have access to more than 60% of absolute GDP. We had that unique opportunity that we were building a new campus. And that so we were creating and we are creating a campus for around 10,000 people. And in India, you have to provide healthcare, transport, educations to your employees. And so we got that whole vision, and we can build the campus as a city of the future, and we can make it a live-in lab. That's how basically Bangalore became at the center for, initially we called it intelligent urbanization, and that later it morphed to smart connected communities. And the point is that in India, that I really start understanding what urbanization is all about. Because India has only an urbanization of 30%. The average around the world is 50. Countries like Brazil are at 70. So if you imagine that in the next decade in India alone, and that more than 100 million people will move from rural areas to urban areas. So if you're in the middle of that, you start understanding what the challenges are. And that in general in India, and that's with a lot of poverty, illiterate people, how to give people access to education, to healthcare as the first prime needs, how then to create jobs. And that's why we moved from intelligent urbanization to smart connected communities, to make it even more holistic. And perhaps the biggest learning was that you have to think out of the box. And if you think about all these challenges, 700 million people giving access, that creating jobs, that education, health, technology has to. We have to think out of the box. You can't do this in the traditional pattern.
I was reading about your project, the Delhi-Mumbai Infrastructure Project, which sounds massive. What are you doing there? What are the goals of it?
Yeah. So the Delhi-Mumbai corridor, that's think about it. It's around 1,000 miles. I think in kilometers, 1,600 kilometers. It is going to be a new railroad transport. And it's India is looking at more manufacturing in the country to create jobs.
Yeah.
And so there is a master plan that with a budget of around $90 billion allocated to create that transport line, but also then to create 24 new cities around that, in clusters with specific themes. For 7 of these cities, that master planning has started, and for 2 of them, that Cisco has been awarded with the master ICT plan, and that is new. That ICT in city planning has always been an afterthought.
Yes.
And so that we are commissioned to come up with a master plan, at what type of services we can create in these cities, public services, um, private services, and that of course triple play. How can we combine them in things that are meaningful for citizens? How can you monetize it? How can you make the right investments? And that's for two of the cities now that the real the detailed type of design has started. So you now see conglomerates starting to work together.
Yes.
And because, like I said, for master planners, technology has always been an afterthought, and now it becomes and it's centered in their awareness.
What particular approaches, consortiums, public-private partnerships, or just public-private collaborations do you have most hope for, most optimistic for?
I strongly believe and it's extremely difficult, public-private partnerships. And that in emerging countries, you see that a lot. And that you see more privatization, airports, healthcare services. And there's even a city being built in India now called Lavasa, William, that is considering an IPO. Everything is privatized. And, so that's perhaps an extreme, but it's a very interesting test case. But the city of Chicago, with Emmanuel, the new mayor, he has basically announced an investment fund of 7 billion. That's where he's asking private companies to come in, invest, and get concessions for 10, 20 years to operate facilities. And that's so public services will be relooked because the investments needed to create these infrastructures horizontally to stay competitive, but also to create better services for your citizens and give them access to that need heavy investments. So public-private partnerships as such, I think, is probably the number one priority, and to study and to share best practices around.
You said regarding India that it gave you much more empathy and humility living there, and you lived there with your family for almost 5 years. How so? What did you learn from the experience?
Yeah, it was an humbling exercise. That extreme poverty, malnutrition, people living on the streets, and still value life, and still being happy. I think it has dramatically changed our life. It has made us more humble. It also that further develops that community feeling, and that also as an enterprise company you have a social responsibility. That corporate social responsibility and being relevant. And so being able to be a technology company and give people access to healthcare, to education, and to help create jobs, not just to sell what you have, but try to create what you need.